Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another edition of the DC Capstone Report. It is great to be back with you this year, starting our new podcast for the 2020 Alabama football season. There's been a lot of things that happened, and we're going to get to that in just a few minutes, but Lance and I are just so glad that you have continued to tune in and listen to us each and every week when we have our podcast. And we know we've had a long hiatus, but with the pandemic and the virus and everything that happened and not knowing we're going to have a football season, we chose to wait until today when football practice starts off to start back with our podcast. So thank you for being loyal listeners, to keep following our page. And I would just ask you to continue to share our page and share our podcast with everybody you know, so give them opportunity to listen on our statements and our conversation on Alabama football. Well, today in the podcast, in our first segment, we're going to take a look and review the offseason, what's happened and how we've gotten to where we are today. In our second segment, we're going to take a look at Coach Saban's press conference, the initial press conference right after the first practice, and see some of the things that we've learned from it. In our third and final segment of the day, we're going to review the first practice of the 2020 Alabama football season.
You're listening to the DC Capstone Report. The DC Capstone Report is featured each Tuesday morning on the Martin Houston Show at Tide 100.9. You can listen live at Tide100.9.com.
Well, it's great to be back on the podcast. DC with the DC Capstone Report. Lance and I are excited each week to bring you this podcast on Alabama football. Well, in our first segment today, let's review what's happened. Been a lot happening since the off season. Last time we were thinking about we were going to have our podcast for our spring, but that didn't happen. The COVID-19 pandemic, which is all across the nation right now, happened, and it's kind of thwarted. There was no football spring game, no football spring training. So, and I hope that each and every one of you are continuing to social distance, to wear your mask, keeping yourself in your own personal bubble, so that you not only stay safe, but we can stay safe for everyone else, so we can have a 2020 football season. Yeah, because of the virus, the season is in jeopardy. Already the Big Ten and the Pac-12 and other smaller conferences have decided not to play football. That's right, cancel football because of the virus. However, the SEC, the ACC, and the Big 12 have decided that, yes, they can put protocols in place to keep the players safe, and it's their plan, their process is to have a football season. So that's what we're looking forward to, is keeping these things in place so we can have a football season. Well, a lot of things happened during the off season. A couple of things that happened prior to the pandemic. One was we lost our strength and conditioning coach, Scott Cochran, to the Georgia Bulldogs. He went over for taking an on-field position with Georgia, and so we lost him. We thought it was going to be difficult to replace him. He's such a great cog in the Saban process here at the University of Alabama. But Coach Saban went out and he got the best people for the job. Replaced him with Coach David Ballou and Dr. Ray, strength and conditioning coach and sports science director, come in with a completely different program, and they revamped everything in the offseason right at the beginning when they came in. And this was very critical to the success that we're going to talk about later that Alabama has had during this offseason. They came in and installed electronic devices, we would call accountability devices, iPads, personal Apple Watches, different things so the players can track and see how they're doing. And it also proved to be a good thing to keep in contact with the players during the season. Well, the pandemic hit right after that, and there was no spring training. There was no opportunity. So the video devices, the Apple Watches, was a great way to track all the players. And so it was really good for them bringing that new technology in and bringing a new system of strength and conditioning and quickness and speed with them in. And the players really bought into that system, and then the offseason did a really good job. We'll talk about that later a little bit in the second segment of how good a job they did. So we had a change in the strength and conditioning was one of the things that happened during the offseason. The second thing that happened was the NFL football draft happened, and a lot of Alabama players were taken in the draft. We lost a lot of talent, so there's a lot of talent to replace. You don't have to look very far to see where the talent needs to be replaced the most is, and that is in the Alabama secondary. If you're on Twitter or any social media and you follow the Alabama football players, you see Jaron Maiden, Xavier McKinney, Shyheim Carter, Trayvon Diggs, all practicing for their NFL clubs right now. When you lose that kind of talent out of the secondary, that's a big blow to your defensive side of the ball. And we'll discuss that a little later in the second and third segment as well. So that was something that happened. We lost a lot of good players to the NFL. And then in the offseason, it seemed like Alabama was behind in recruiting. That's right. It looked like we were in some of the recruiting services 21st or maybe 30th at one point because we'd gotten a slow start in the 2021 recruiting class, and that was just unheard of for Alabama football. Then the pandemic hit, and there were talking heads around the nation that believed that Coach Saban was going to be at a disadvantage because he liked to recruit in person, he liked to do the on-campus visits, he liked to do all the things to try to close the deal with the parents. And everybody thought he's going to be at a disadvantage. They're already behind. He's going to be a disadvantage. But you know what? Coach Saban proved them all wrong and took advantage of the technology that had been put in place with the video, the Zoom, the electronic devices to try to keep in contact with the players and their families. And although the in-campus visits were stopped, he was able to gradually close the gap. And finally, within the last couple of months, as of yesterday, has pulled into a close second to Ohio State in the current 2021 football rankings. How did that happen? Well, he got some great players, some five-star players out of Florida and Alabama. But really, he dove into an area that we've recruited in the past, have had some success in Texas, and it's really made a headway. The part in Texas started with the Brockmeyer twins. Tommy Brockmeyer, the number one player in the state of Texas by all accounts, the number one offensive tackle in the state of Texas, came to the decided to commit to the University of Alabama. Although he is a legacy of the Texas Longhorns, his father played for Texas. His brother, twin brother, he is the number one center in the state of Texas. He and his brother come together as players in the 2021 class. Then a defensive player, William Blackshear, a linebacker out of Texas, who people thought that the Texas schools had a really good chance to get. He comes in the University of Alabama. And then yesterday, on top of Blackshear and Brockmeyer, out of Houston, Texas, Alabama gets a flip from a four-star dual-threat quarterback, the number one dual-threat quarterback in the state of Texas, who had been committed to the Texas Longhorns for over a year. Alabama gets a flip and gets a 100% commitment from Jalen Milroe. So that pushed us to so close to second place behind Ohio State yesterday in the rankings. So one of the stories of Alabama coming out of the offseason being behind recruiting has fastly switched the topic here to Alabama being, again, having a stellar 2021 recruiting class. So just a review of the offseason. The pandemic started. There was a lot of things that went into uncertainty with the pandemic. A lot of things stopped the way we did things. We lost our strength and conditioning coach. We were behind in recruiting. But just like a good Alabama football team, all those things were turned around. We seem to have protocols in place to help us continue to play safely during the pandemic. Although things were stopped, we were able to close the gap in recruiting by using new technology and still meeting with players via electronic devices. And Coach Saban was able to flip some players from other schools to close the ranking. And finally, the strength and conditioning coaches have come on that have been hired have really made a difference in the players at the University of Alabama. Well, in our second segment today, we want to talk about Coach Saban's press conference. Yesterday, we got to talk about football. We've been talking about the pandemic for so long and the virus and the COVID-19. We finally get to talk about football. Coach Saban had his initial press conference of the 2020 year, and some great nuggets came out of it right after our first practice. Several things happened yesterday. At the time of the practice, the schedule was released. This year, the SEC, because of the pandemic, has gone to a 10-game conference-only schedule, and it was released yesterday that Alabama would face Missouri as the first game of the season on September the 26th by traveling to Missouri. Now, a lot of the talking heads, a lot of the people thought that Alabama fans even think this is not such a great setup for a first game. Not too excited about it, but I remember a 1975 game that Alabama played Missouri in Legion Field, and Richard Todd was quarterback. and Alabama didn't do a very good job of preparing for that, and they went in and lost to an underdog Missouri team in 1975. Missouri came out with an unknown running back named Tony Galbraith, ran over Alabama. Alabama wasn't prepared. So any team on your schedule can beat you. I think this is and Coach Saban believes, it's a good opening test for us to go on the road and play a quality SEC opponent. Coach Saban's been pushing for a 10-game conference schedule for a while now because it gives players opportunity to play against good quality opponents, to hone their own skills and also develop value for themselves playing against other caliber opponents. So going on the road against Missouri is good for Alabama to open up. Another thing we learned yesterday at the press conference, Coach Saban is big on maintaining the personal bubble for the players. He's big on the protocols and the procedures are in place to make sure that the players play and stay in a safe environment. What he's trying to do is create an environment so the players have an opportunity to play. We've seen all around the nation when the Big 10 and the Pac-12 canceled, those players in those schools still want to play. And that since the SEC and the ACC and the Pac-12, the Big 12 are given opportunity for players to play, Coach Saban wants to maintain the best possible environment to make it possible for these players to play. And I think that's what's going on at Alabama. So we learned a little bit about their protocols. We also learned that he's not going to name names of players that give an opt-out. He said that every player has an opportunity to opt out and not play if they want to, and they won't be punished for that. And that's something good, I think. We may see some players down the road that redshirt out of this year. So I think that's something that we can look at down the road to see any players that may or may not play, may decide to opt out, and we may see them as a redshirt this year. Another thing that he spoke about yesterday was the team showed up for the first practice in great shape. He was very pleased with where the team came up, both in physical shape and mental shape. That means that he highlighted the strength and conditioning team of Coach Ballou and Dr. Ray. They got the team ready to play. So I think that just goes to show you what we talked about in our first segment. That was a great hire, and they've done a great job. But not only have they done a great job, but the players have bought into the system and taken advantage of the tools that they've been given to be in good shape. Coach Saban spoke about their physical shape, how they were in good shape physically, and then he talked about that he was going to use these. This is not a fall camp in his mind. It's a preparation for game week. And that means that they came in mental shape. They learned, they took advantage of these Zoom meetings that they had. Couldn't have a spring practice, but they were able to have instructional Zoom meetings with them. And these players have taken advantage, and it's been good for them to be able to get and dissect and digest all the material about the schemes and the plans and the playbook and everything in a setting outside of on-field work. And so that's taking advantage of that and learning. So the players showed up ready to practice, knowing the schemes, mentally in shape, and physically in good shape. We had a long list of players that gained weight and players that lost weight. So this strength and conditioning team is working and working well. Coach Saban did allude to the fact that the defense needed improvement. He spoke it on a question that was asked him about the defense. He said, of course our defense needs improvement. We've had 2 years in a row where we've had the worst points allowed that we've ever had in our defensive teams. So we want to get back to a better defense at Alabama. And he mentioned what we mentioned in the first segment. The glaring part that needs to be replaced is the secondary. Right now, you're looking at the secondary. We have so many that's gone on to the NFL. That's some places that he's going to look to replace. And I think some players are going to have opportunity to compete for starting positions in that area. So we learned a lot from the press conference. One thing we learned is that Coach Saban is excited to be back on the field. He's excited about the players showing up in shape and ready to play. And he's excited about the opportunity that Alabama is giving the players to play. He's optimistic, but we still need to maintain that personal bubble in order for that first game against Missouri at Missouri on September the 26th to become a reality. So we'll follow that in the days ahead to see how practices go. Right now, he reported that the testing has been less than 1% positive rates in the last 2 weeks. If we can keep that rate, it looks like we're headed for an Alabama football season in 2020. Well, here on the third segment and final segment, we're going to look at the practice. That's right, we're going to talk about practice. In the words of Allen Iverson, you're talking about practice. Yeah, we have nothing to talk about for a while. We've been talking about the virus over and over and over, and now we get to talk about Alabama football practice. Well, a lot of observations to look at from the practice yesterday. First of all, the team showed up in great shape, both physically and mentally. The team is ready to play. One of the things that jumped out yesterday from all the reports I heard in practice is on the defensive side of the ball, Dylan Moses has showed up as a leader. He is that leader that we've been waiting for to step up. We didn't have last year. We had such a young team. He's coming back from injury, decided to come back for his senior season, and he showed up yesterday as a leader on that team. Great to see him out there in practice doing well. We learned that there is no injuries to speak of on the team. The only person held out of practice right now is Ale Cahoe, the linebacker. He had a little knee strain. He'll be out for a couple of days, but everyone else is in good shape, and it's great to see Dylan Moses back out there in his office, the quarterback of that defense. Another part on defense, as we stay on the defensive side, is the defensive line looks really good. They look big. They look quick. Got a good defensive line. LeBron Ray coming back from injury. But this year, the guy I'm telling everyone to look at is the guy I've always been high on. That's Christian Baramore. He has a motor that never stops. And I think the offseason, him grasping the playbook better, has helped him in a way to be physically and mentally ready to have a great breakout season on the defensive line. So look for Christian Baramore to show up and show out. Staying on the defensive side of the ball, it looks like on the secondary, we've all talked about being the weak link this year, or at least the weakest point for the lack of experience. As you know, so many have gone on to the NFL out of the secondary. The only starter that we can pencil in for sure we know of is Patrick Surtain. He looks good, looks quick. Looks like he's increased his speed and quickness in the offseason. He looked really good. The other places, looks like people have an opportunity. There's a great opportunity for people to step up, like Eddie Smith and Josh Jobe and others, to step up and find a spot in the starting rotation in the secondary. That's the place for people can get to play. So look in the coming weeks to decide, for the coaches to decide who gets the playing time in the secondary to go along and complement Patrick Surtain. All right, moving over to the offensive side of the ball. Offensive side of the ball shows up in the two main players that we highlight. One, running back Najee Harris. Najee Harris coming back for his senior year, surprising everyone to come back, and he showed up as a leader in this. He's been a leader in the We Want to Play movement. He's been more vocal, and it just really looked good to see him out there leading this running back class. Now the running back class is a little crowded. I wouldn't be surprised to see some of a running back class take opportunity to redshirt, either through opting out or through just a regular redshirt year. Maybe some of the sophomores, see a sophomore, somebody that didn't play much last year, or maybe some of our freshmen to redshirt. But you got Najee Harris, Brian Robinson. To note, he's changed his number to number 4, one that he wore as a high school player at Hillcrest High School. And so we got him and Najee Harris. You got also the great freshman running backs that are coming on. And just a lot of running backs there that are going to be vying for playing time. But great to see Najee Harris be a leader on this offensive team. Also, the other leader that jumped out at everyone in practice yesterday was, at the first practice, was Mac Jones. Mac Jones comes in as the leader of this team, both physically and mentally ready to lead this team. He knows everybody's looking at Bryce Young, that great freshman, phenom out of California, to come in and take over, but he's not going to give his starting role to anyone. He's come in ready to play. Yesterday he was crisp in his practicing. He was crisp in his play calling. He was crisp in his throws. He made a lot of great deep throws, a lot of great out throws. I understand that he hit several out routes perfectly and did some deep balls and made some big plays with some of the great wide receiver playmakers that we have. So Mac Jones has come ready to play, and there will be a quarterback battle for the starting job at the University of Alabama this year. The next person I want to mention is the name. Every year in practice, is the first practice somebody grabs your eye. Years ago it was Quinion Williams. People started talking about before he was big time. Then it was a young kid named Jalen Waddle, how quick he was, and we saw how that's come to pass. Well, yesterday the name I heard from several sources was a wide receiver freshman out of Powder Springs, Georgia, named Javon Baker. So a name to watch in the coming days is Javon Baker. Will he continue to shine in practice as he did yesterday? Made some great big plays, made some great deep ball catches. So watch for Javon Baker. What a good first practice he had. Well, the first practice is in the books. Coach Saban's had his first press conference, and it looks like we're on a road to have our first game against the Missouri Tigers on the road on September the 26th. Lance and I will continue to put together podcasts that talk about Alabama football. If you'll watch our podcast on our Facebook page and share it, look at dccapstonereport.com, and also you can follow me on Twitter at DavidCott50.